I had an encounter a few years ago that was so bizarre and horrifying that it still bothers me. Though it was only a dream, it was a nightmare that lasted for what seemed like 2 years of my life. And if some would find it interesting or even pleasant to spend 2 years in a dream, this was a kind of misery I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The earth I knew was gone from my dream, replaced with a warped version of it. After society collapsed, all that remained was a harsh, desolate environment in which survival was the only objective. There was no warmth or comfort of any kind, no friends, no family. I was the only surviving piece of a universe that had vanished, and I was totally alone. The cities I explored were formerly vibrant centers of activity, but they were now only eerie ruins. Once proud emblems of human achievement, skyscrapers were reduced to skeletal ruins with broken glass panes and twisted, bending steel frames. The only sounds in the streets today are the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of a wild animal. The streets had formerly been alive with the sounds of people and traffic. The scent of decay permeated the air, and every step I took seemed to take me farther into insanity. The people were no longer human in any distinguishable way, or at least what remained of them was. The expression in their eyes was so blank and ape-like that I nicknamed them wild eyes. After these animals lost all traces of civilization, they were reduced to beasts driven solely by instinct. They moved clumsily, sometimes on all fours and other times on 2 legs, their bodies twisted and disfigured by whatever had robbed them of their humanity. Many of them were half naked, their clothes hanging in tatters, their exposed skins smeared with dirt and scars. They were hazardous, unpredictable, and awful. I quickly learned to stay away from the insane looks at all times. They were usually innocuous if left alone, but savage and ferocious when hungry or, worse, felt the need to satiate some other primal desire. I had saw some of them attack one of their own once, tearing the poor creature limb from limb in a whirl of blood and gore. They went more than that. I'm still horrified by the way they deformed the body. I could not escape the nightmare I was living through. Every day was a struggle to survive on this terrible planet. I had no idea why I was experiencing this, who I was, or where I was. I searched for food and water by searching through the ruins of abandoned apartments and robbing stores. Perhaps since wild eyes avoided the flats because they couldn't figure out how to open doors, the flats were the safest locations to sleep. I had broken into so many flats, rummaging through cabinets for canned goods and bottled water in the hopes that the previous residents had left behind something that would help me hold out a little while longer. I had several bouts of illness. I can vividly remember the week I spent laying in a corner of my apartment, shivering, and unable to move due to a fever and chills. I had no medicine and no one to look after me. Since it seemed like I was about to die, I almost welcomed the discharge. I was able to survive though, thanks only to my willpower and any food I could force down. It was an overwhelming terror. I couldn't force myself to stop it, to find a way out of the horror, even if I wanted to. I was physically and psychologically imprisoned in an unending nightmare. And then I woke up, after what seemed like 2 years. To put it mildly, the change from the nightmare to reality was abrupt. I had no idea where I was or what was real at first. I was afraid that the nightmare had not finished and had somehow followed me into the waking world as my thoughts were still stuck in that horrible place. My mother's voice, beckoning me down for breakfast, finally reached my ears after I had been too scared to move or make a sound. I sobbed excessively because the relief that overcame me was so strong. I could not stop crying for what seemed like hours. It took the taste of my mother's breakfast and the aroma of her cooking to finally reassure me that I was safe and that I was really home. But the anxiety persisted even after that. Returning to my room, I sobbed once more, this time from a place of deep relief and thankfulness for the life I had, a life I had all but forgotten. There are still things about the dream and nightmare that I don't entirely understand. It seemed as though I had witnessed the end of humanity, lived through an apocalyptic event, and managed to survive. Even though it was only a dream, I still consider the recollections to be as genuine as anything I've ever encountered. I still occasionally reflect on it, and every time I do, I find myself wondering what it all meant. Was there something more, or was it just a bad dream? An early look at the future, a mirror of my worst fears. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm thankful to live in a planet that is still teeming with life, love, and hope, no matter how imperfect. I say this every day. Years have passed, yet I still can't get rid of the notion that the nightmare is still there, ready to entice me back in by hiding just beneath the surface. And for the rest of my life, I will carry that thought, that horrifying potential. The memories of that nightmare cling to me like a shadow, never really leaving the boundaries of my awareness, even while I'm awake. I can sometimes still see those destroyed towns when I close my eyes, smell the decaying stink, and hear the wild eyes far away, resounding cries. It seems like the dream has left a scar on my mind that will never go away. Sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between a dream and reality. For an instant, it will seem as though I'm back there, alone and surrounded by the ruins of a world that has lost all feeling of humanity, while I'm strolling down a familiar street amid the bustle of daily life. The sounds of cars, laughing, and talking get muffled and far away, like I'm hearing them through a thick fog. I had to pause, take a deep breath, and convince myself that I'm safe, and that this is all just a dream as the buildings around me appear to be collapsing and decaying before my very eyes. Was it, though, only a dream? I'm most troubled by that question. I occasionally question whether I accidentally entered an other reality or a parallel universe where everything had gone wrong because it felt so visceral and real. The details were too accurate and too vivid to be a trick of my mind. I still recall the flavor of the stale, expired food I had to scavenge to survive, the feel of the cracked asphalt beneath my boots, and the sound of the wind howling through the deserted streets. How could my imagination produce anything so gruesomely intricate? I've made an effort to move on, to ignore such recollections, and to concentrate on my current life. However, it's not simple. The nightmare has shaped my perspective on the world and has become a part of who I am. I've grown more circumspect and conscious of the frailty of our civilization. It doesn't seem so crazy now to think that everything we know may vanish in an instant, leaving us to fight for ourselves in a harsh, cruel world. Sometimes I find myself glued to the news, reading about natural disasters, political upheaval, and international problems, and I can't shake the feeling of dread I'm feeling. What if this is just the start? What if my dream served as a forewarning, a peek at what can occur if we don't make a change in our behavior? I attempt to ignore the terrible concept, but it continually nags at the back of my mind like an ominous storm approaching. I shared my story with a few friends, family members, and even a therapist, but nobody seems to truly get it. They nod, they listen, and they make an effort to reassure me. But how can they really know how much I went through? How can they comprehend the constant sensation of fear, loneliness, and hopelessness that characterized those 2 years? I frequently find myself keeping that experience to myself, tucking it away in a mental corner where it can't harm anyone else because it's impossible to fully express in words. But this experience has also left me feeling strangely strong, in spite of the terror and the pain that still lingers. I made it through an unfathomable ordeal that tested the limits of my sanity, and I emerged unscathed. I now realize that I'm stronger than I ever imagined, and that there's a part of me that will never give up, even in the worst of circumstances. I've never had more resilience or quiet confidence in my ability to overcome obstacles in life, because to this understanding. Still, the worry is there. The worry that when I close my eyes one day, I'll wake up in that nightmare, back in that lonely, abandoned world. The worry that it was more than simply a dream. Rather, it was a premonition, a sneak peek at a reality that would arrive too soon. I have to live with this fear every day, and it keeps me up at night wondering what it all means as I stare at the ceiling. For now, though, all I can do is try to live in the now, appreciate the life I have, and cling to the hope that the nightmare was only that, a nightmare. I try to take solace in the little things in life, like the feel of my mother's arms around me, the sound of laughing, and the warmth of the sun on my cheek. These are the things that serve as a constant reminder that I am still alive, that the world is still in motion, and that goodness still exists in it, despite its fragility. Perhaps in due course, the recollections of that terrifying experience will diminish, turning into merely a faint echo in the back of my mind. Maybe in the future, I won't have to worry about it or have that constant sense of dread. But until then, I'm going to keep going one day at a time, appreciative of my existence and resolved to live it to the fullest. If anything, the experience taught me to never take life for granted because it is so precious. I carry the experience's weight with me as I move on, but I also use it as a reminder to live life to the fullest and to cherish the little moments of happiness and connection that add up to a meaningful life. Perhaps that is the real purpose of the dream, to make me appreciate the life I have and never give up on the belief that, despite how hopeless things may appear, there is always light in the world. We only need to have the guts to search for it.